Okay, so as we've now pretty much finished the back end, for the moment anyway, we're going to concentrate now on the front. So you'll notice I've already managed to get one of the front wheel assemblies off. It's a noisy bike to go past. Yeah, was a bit of a nightmare, and also started putting the engine back together. I can't remember if I showed or not, but inlet manifolds, exhaust manifold and the carbs are back on. They are all working okay. Choke's working okay. So that's starting to get rebuilt, which is nice. So yeah, got the wheel off. A couple issues. I wanted to take this whole part off as well so I can get down to the chassis below it down there, but I've managed to get in there and paint and scrub most of it away anyway. It's not too bad, there isn't any major rust in there. Of course the problem is the engine mount attaches to this part of the frame, so if I take this off I've got to find a way of propping the engine, and to be honest it's just not really worth it. I can still get to most of the frame anyway. So we've started taking the steering rack off, 2 bolts on the underside here, and that U-clamp comes off. So this side's come off, but these track rod ends are being an absolute nightmare to get off. This one started spinning, so I got the bolt, I got the nut halfway down, and then the actual thread started spinning. Obviously it's a ball joint in there, so that started spinning. So I had to clamp onto this, tear the rubber off, clamp onto this with a pair of mole grips in order to get that nut off, which is fine. Now the other side is quite the opposite. The other side isn't spinning at all, so I've managed to get the nut off, but I'll be damned if I can actually get it out of the coupling, whatever you call it, on the hub. I've got it jacked up at the moment, trying to put stress on it with the jack, on the thread to try and push it up. I've tried levering it off with a screwdriver. I soaked it in WD-40. That is the only thing stopping me getting this steering rack off. The rest of it is all off. I just need to get that track rod end off. And the anti-roll bar as well. Try and zoom down. Here we go. Yeah, anti-roll bar down here. So I've taken the U-clamp off the bottom of that one. The rubber, you know, it's okay. It's not in bad nick, but I'm going to change it anyway for the sake of the cost of a couple quid of a new rubber. So I need to take the rest off. And again, the anti-roll bar has this little ball joint thing on the back. And if I can show you, what happens is, when you undo this nut, this assembly inside starts to spin. So you end up having to wedge a screwdriver down beside it to try and get in there to stop it spinning, but it's really difficult to stop it spinning. I'll just show you on the zoom there. So what I ended up doing is taking the nut off the bottom down there and then sliding that whole drop link off, which was fine on the other side, but on this side my car is pressed right in against the wall here, so I haven't got any room to work. It's very difficult to get enough torque on a wrench to do it. So that's today's job. See if I can get the steering rack off, see if I can get the anti-roll bar off, and then I can take those away, give them a good clean up, and then start to reassemble this side. So the spring and the shock are okay, absolutely fine. The spring did give me a shock when it came off. I didn't use a spring compressor. It didn't feel like there was that much pressure in it, but it went off like a shotgun, scared the life out of me. There we go, live and learn. So I finally managed to get the nut on the back of the drop link for the anti-roll bar off by using a pair of mole grips. Just managed to get it loose enough that I can now get a ratchet onto it and spin it off. So success. That's after about 4 hours of trying various things. Ta-da! I've been trying to get that bolt out for 2 days. 2 days. Random things I've found since I've been doing this restoration work on this car is that if you get old rusty nuts and bolts with quite a long thread on them, you find that you can get it going, and that's okay. You soak in WD, you can get it going, but then after, you know, 5 or 6 turns it starts to tighten up. No matter how much you clean the bolt, it tends to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And then if you manage to actually get a nut off, you realise when you go to pick it up it's red hot. So obviously there's been so much friction during the undoing process that the metal's starting to expand, and that's why it grips tight. So I found that if you've got, say, 2 bolts to undo or 4 bolts to undo, whatever, you know, you do one halfway, leave it, go to another one, do that one halfway, or zap it with a bit of WD to cool it down. And that makes getting them out a lot easier, rather than just swinging off one nut for, I mean, I've been doing one nut for over an hour before, because you can only get to maybe 2 clicks on a ratchet. So you're constantly trying to just bend upside down and get this bloody bolt out, and it drives you around the twist, not to mention destroying your back. So yeah, live and learn. So with the anti-roll bar and the steering rack off, now I can turn my attention to the brake caliper, at least on this side. 2 bolts here, 2 bolts there, that holds the 2 halves of the caliper together. Take them out, and you're left with 2 halves. Adjust the camera slightly. So what we're going to do now is try and get these pistons out. Obviously when we're going this far, it makes sense to actually take the brakes apart and make sure there's no rust inside, make sure the pistons move freely. You wouldn't want to get out, be flying down a country lane, pull the anchors on, and then only one side bites and it flips you into a hedge. Yeah. So first things first, we're going to take the little metal ring off that holds the dust cover on. So leave that up carefully with a small screwdriver, make sure we don't tear the rubber, and then just follow it around and pop that off. So now we can get the actual rubber dust cover off itself. Same thing, get a small screwdriver underneath it, careful to not tear it, slide it round just where it's basically stuck fast to the metal, and just work it around slowly. I eventually managed to get that track rod end out by getting a pair of mole grips over it and then whacking on them with a lump hammer just to try and shock it out of the bottom mount. It took a good lot of whacking and a couple of days of head scratching, but it's finally jump free, so yeah, I'm a happy bunny. And while the underside of the actual piston itself looks okay from this view, obviously you can't tell what it's like inside, so I can't tell what the seal's like, so it's too much of a risk to just leave it as is, hope for the best and stick it on. There's a small lip on the top, so we're just going to use a screwdriver just to try and raise it up. It is actually stuck fast inside the caliper, so whether it's sort of classed as seized or not, I don't know, but it is definitely stuck fast. In the Haynes manual they say you should inject high pressure air in through the brake fluid port to try and sort of shock it up, but not having compressed air makes it a little bit difficult. So we're just going to use a little bit of WD, roll it around the edge just to try and loosen it, to penetrate in it, and then we'll just keep working at it with that screwdriver for a second. And then after a bit of levering and attack with the old mole grips to try and get it turning, finally it's come out. And we can see there, apart from a little bit of dirt on the piston and some old brake fluid inside, it's actually pretty good. It's pretty shiny. You can see a ring around it there where it's been sat for a while, so we'll take this out, we'll give it a really good clean up. And with the inside all cleaned out and the piston shined up nicely, and we'll then attack it with a wire brush just to get any of that, see there's a bit of rust in there, just surface rust, just get that scrubbed out. Bit of silicone oil and a wire brush and just work at it. There we go, looks nice and clean on the inside now, so just get a little bit of grease on our small screwdriver and just apply a bit of grease to that rubber seal on the inside just to make sure we're getting a nice tight seal, and then the piston can go back in. You can always tell when you're pushing it back in whether it's making a good seal. You can see by the speed it's going back in out there. It's not sliding straight back in, I'm having to really push it to slide it in, so we know we've got a good airtight seal in there, so I'm happy with that. So finally we'll give the rubber dust cover a quick clean up after I blow the bug off the camera. Same thing, zap it with a bit of silicone oil, and then we're just going to rub it off with a cloth, just get any dirt off it. Make sure I'm also inspecting it for any splits or tears while we do it. And with that all cleaned up, we can now put it back over the piston, make sure it's sat in correctly, and then we'll give our metal locking ring a quick clean up. Same thing, bit of silicone oil and a cloth, just to make sure there's no nothing on it that's going to abrade, so there's no kind of oxidization or anything on it, or small bits of rust. Obviously we don't want to tear that rubber, so we'll just give that a quick wipe over. And with that all cleaned up, now we can simply just hook it over the little lip, snap it in, and we're good to go. There we go, all back on. And a quick zap of silicone oil, just because again we're not going to be actually testing it on the car for a few weeks yet, so a little bit of oil on those rubbers and on those surfaces isn't going to do any harm. And here's one I made earlier. Before you put the two halves back together, make sure you don't forget the little O-ring that sits between the two. If you do forget that, obviously it's just going to pour brake fluid out the first time you push it. And also make sure the mating surfaces are nice and clean. And with those in the right place, a bit of copper slip on your bolts, and then all 4 bolts back in. And there we go, one finished caliper. I'll probably paint it at some point. I don't know what colour yet. I don't know whether to paint it something really leery like red, or white to go with the rest of the car, or black because that's the paint I've been using for everything else. I don't know. So there we go, here's the front end with the steering rack gone and the anti-roll bar, so now I can get access to those 2 front chassis rails, give them a good scrub out and a repaint. This is the anti-roll bar, all the old paint's flaking off, the bar itself is fine, the bushes on it will need changing. That's my caliper all done, so that's one side done. I'll have to do the other side later on, then obviously do the rest of the hub, clean the brake disc, etc. There's the spring and the damper. Again, damper works fine, spring is fine, just needs a good scrub back and a clean up. And then there is your troublesome steering rack that gave me such a ball ache to get off, but it's finally off. Both track rod ends intact, the ball joints on them are absolutely fine, and the bellows are fine, so yeah, happy with that. It's one of those jobs that I'm glad it's finally done.